Delighted to welcome to the show Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. Let's talk about that report from the Equality and Human Rights Commission into the dealing with anti-Semitism claims in the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn was suspended, saying it had all been dramatically overstated. We just had Ken Livingstone, the former Labour Mayor of London, on saying that it had all been a con. What was your reaction to that report?
Well, there's only two political parties in British history that have ever been investigated for racism by the Equality and Human Rights Commission. One is the BNP, the other is the Labour Party, and they've been found guilty. I think it's welcome that Keir Starmer has taken the action he has. But the reality is, this is the same leader of the Labour Party that was calling for Jeremy Corbyn to be our Prime Minister less than a year ago at the general election. I think it'll be very interesting to see what further action he takes, whether Jeremy Corbyn is let in by the back door. And what really counts in all of this is how serious the Labour Party is. And again, Keir was the one who time and time again was defending Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party as we went through these allegations, and many of them from within the Labour Party itself.
Well, this is the thing. There's a lot of people are questioning the fact that only a few months ago, Keir Starmer was trying to put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. Nevertheless, he says, he is now on top of the matter. Sayeeda Warsi, former chair of the Conservatives, she, as she often does in the wake of any conversations about anti-Semitism, has piped up with a tweet about Islamophobia. She says, in the Conservative Party, do you think that there is the same issue with Islamophobia in the Conservative Party as there is with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party?
No, I don't, but don't take my word for it. Look at what the Equality and Human Rights Commission did and has said, and they didn't take any action in relation to the Conservative Party precisely because they felt that we had the processes in place. And it is crucial, let me say, that we have zero tolerance for any racism, any Islamophobia. And if you look at, as Foreign Secretary, around the world, I'm raising the issue of the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims in China, sometimes often more strenuously than Muslim countries. I think that shows that not only in our words, but also in our deeds, that we stand up for any and stand against any racism or any Islamophobia.
Well, let's talk about that in relation to France. There's horrific terror attacks in France yesterday, a number of different incidents. Of course, the main one in Nice with 3 people killed, a woman beheaded. There's been a lot of criticism of the Turkish President Erdogan over him sort of stirring up and fanning the flames of extremism ahead of the beheading of the French teacher Samuel Paty 2 weeks ago today. Are we entering a new era in terms of sort of battles between some Islamic countries and we've seen the Pakistani Prime Minister as well, Imran Khan making statements as well. Are we entering a new era of very strained relations where we are seeing a sort of almost a battle of cultures here?
Well, I don't think that the debate around that is new. Since the end of the Cold War, people have been talking about this at a global level. I think the most important thing from the point of view of the UK is that we're absolutely clear. We stand shoulder to shoulder with our French friends, the French people and the French government. I've been in contact with Jean-Yves Le Drian, my French opposite number, to say we stand shoulder to shoulder with them. We'll give them any support they need in tackling anyone else who is responsible for these hideous terrorist attacks. And also more broadly on the point, I don't think that we in the West and amongst our NATO alliance, we should allow the terrorists the gift, the succor of seeing us argue amongst ourselves, which is why I think that solidarity with France is very important.
Does your solidarity extend to the fact that the right of people to print a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, and even if that is very offensive for millions of Muslims in this country, people have a right to do it?
As the great liberal thinker John Stuart Mill said, liberty means the freedom to express yourself, but also that we need to be resilient about debate, and we can't just find things that are insensitive, that we may feel are insensitive or offensive, and use that as a pretext, particularly for horrendous, violent attacks, as we saw in France. I think we have got freedom of expression. I do think that there's a responsibility to express ourselves in a way which is sensitive to other cultures and other faiths. But at the end of the day, the biggest risk to our democracy is seeing those freedoms whittled away and the self-restraints or indeed even the censorship not to be able to discuss big issues. So I agree with you, and I think we do need to be resilient about debate. But I also think it's right to say that that we also ought to be respectful in the way we express ourselves. But at the end of the day, in a free country, unless you're causing harm to others or violence to others or inciting hatred, and that's quite a high bar, I think you should be able to express yourself freely.
Okay, let's talk about stuff that's rather closer to home, though, and all these COVID regulations restricting our lives. A huge new swathes of the country have moved from Tiers 1 to Tiers 2 and Tiers 2 to Tiers 3. A fifth of the country now in Tier 3. Lots of restrictions on what they can and can't do, restrictions on businesses as well. Lots of talk of Tier 4 effectively going back into a lockdown to all intents and purposes, non-essential shops closing, although people are still able to send their kids to school and go out to work if they can't work from home. Are we inevitably heading towards what will, to all intents and purposes, be a national lockdown?
No, I don't think it's a question of inevitability, but the virus will respond to the actions that we take. I think it is far better to take a targeted, focused approach, which targets the virus where it is growing, which allows those areas which are not so affected to continue more akin to normal, whether it's businesses or communities. And I think that's the most effective. I also think for communities, that's the fairest approach. But we need to lean into it. We really need to be committed to the localised measures. I know it's difficult. In my own constituency, we moved to the high tier. That causes frustrations, it causes inconvenience. But by leaning in and being really committed to the tiered approach, we avoid and we escape the so-called inevitability that you described of having to take a national level lockdown, which is a far blunter instrument, both in tackling the virus, but also in keeping the economy going.
What do you mean by leaning in? Are you saying, if people all actually obey the rules? Are you implying, therefore, where these tier restrictions don't work, and there's no evidence that Tier 2 restrictions worked in Greater Manchester for 2 months as they saw infection rates rise, that actually people aren't obeying the rules? Is that the problem?
Overwhelmingly, I think the vast majority of people are, but I think in this very delicate stage that we're at, we need everyone to be adhering to the rules. And when I talked about everyone leaning in, I don't just mean people who may be listening or watching to your show this morning. I also mean the local leaders, the councils, working collaboratively as most are with the government. And my point, and the scientists have made this point, Patrick Vallance, Chris Whitt have made this point, with the targeted approach, for it to work, everyone needs to be totally committed to it at a citizen level, at a local level.
I don't know what you mean by that.
So I mean compliance, I mean local authorities working hand in glove with the national government, and I mean in terms of both restrictions, but also the financial support we're providing.
Okay, but it also involves people actually following these rules. The thing is, we are seeing very, very different restrictions in different parts of the country. We're seeing different restrictions in France, in Ireland, in Scotland, in Wales, in Germany, and yet every single country is seeing a resurgence of this virus. We are told these infection rates are going up. Does that not suggest to you that actually, as you said earlier, the virus will respond to the actions we take? That actually the virus isn't going to respond to the actions we take. The virus is going to do what the virus is going to do, like all respiratory illnesses and coronaviruses in the autumn season. And regardless of what we do, it's going to spread. In which case, why are we living with all these restrictions on our lives and on our economy?
Well, I don't think that's quite right, Julia, although in a way, I think you've described it yourself. Different places and different countries and different regions within countries have taken different approaches. The virus is not spreading at the same rate and intensity everywhere. And so the most important thing is to learn the lessons where, and in particular, the most effective measures to take, track the virus where it's strongest, where it presents the greatest threat, focus with laser-like precision and total commitment our efforts and our financial support on those areas. And that is the way that the intelligent way to tackle the virus where it's strongest. And that avoids the blunt tool of a nationwide approach, which will be damaging to the economy. And I don't think, as the World Health Organization has said, is a reserve power, and because it is not the most effective way of tackling the virus.
Well, it actually says never. Its actual guidance for pandemics is that you should never have a lockdown. Yeah, we did it before. The Prime Minister said categorically there would be no second lockdown. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, yesterday, I know it's not her decision, but she refused to rule out a second lockdown. Can you rule out a full national second lockdown right now?
I can't rule anything.
Why not?
Out, because we're tracking a virus in real terms, day by day, and our public health comes first. But as you will, and I've heard you talk about this before, the economy, society, the non-COVID health implications also factor in. So the most important thing right now is, and the best way to rule out a second national lockdown is to make the progress with the targeted localized measures. And the point at which we'll be able to do that is where we've got the virus under control at a level, both in terms of prevalence but also growth rate, where we've got the empirical basis on which to say, okay, we're through this, or we can move to a much lower level of controls.
Okay, and just finally, I know a bit over time, but you're married, you've got kids, you've got in-laws and parents. Which set of grandparents have you decided to ditch for Christmas Day this year for the rule of 6?
I had this very difficult conversation at the weekend. My in-laws are in Brazil because my wife's from Brazil. So
you've lucked out.
We'd have liked to go there. We can't do it. I've got friends and my brother and sister-in-law in Paris. We'd like them to come over. And I appreciate some of these challenges and decisions, family by family, will be invidious. But the reality is, my view is, my family's view is, and I think the country's overwhelming view is, we've got to get through this. And so we'll have to adapt, we'll have to adjust. But the most important thing to avoid those difficult decisions and to have more flexibility is to take the action now at a targeted level.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab. Appreciate your time.